Hi guys, we're going to talk about the operations when you have rational numbers. So we're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide positive and negative fractions, decimals, and using those rules of integers to apply them to what we already know about fractions and decimals. So whenever we're adding or subtracting, regardless if it's a positive or negative, we're going to need common denominators. So in this first problem, my common denominator is 45. So I'm going to create an equivalent fraction to 4/5, and I'm going to make that 36/45. And my -2/9 is going to end up being -10/45. Now going back to our rules, where I have some positives and some negatives, I'm going to go ahead and subtract, and my answer is going to be positive because I have more positives. So my answer ends up being 26/45. Okay? And my answer is positive because I have more positives. But I actually ended up subtracting here, even though it was an addition problem. In this problem, I'm going to rewrite it, knowing that subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So in this case, I'm going to create a common denominator of 24. I have 1 and 8/24 plus 21/24. I can go ahead and change these into improper fractions if I want, but I don't have to because in this case, I'm simply adding. I'm going to go ahead and have 1 and 29/24, which ends up equaling 2 and 5/24. Okay. Common denominators for both adding and subtracting all the time, and then I'm following the rules of integer operations. For multiplication and division, a positive times a positive is going to be a positive. A negative times a negative is also going to be a positive, and then one of each is going to be negative. So that rules apply for multiplying and dividing. So in multiplication, if I have mixed numbers, I have to change them to improper fractions. So this now becomes -5/4 times -3/2. A negative and a negative is a positive. There's nothing I can simplify ahead of time. So I end up with 15/8 or 1 and 7/8. A negative times divided by a positive is going to be a negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative, but I have to change them into improper fractions. 7/5. When I divide, I multiply by the reciprocal. I can simplify prior to multiplication. My answer ends up being negative because I have one of the numbers that one of the rational numbers is negative. Here, I know my answer is going to be negative because a positive times a negative is a negative. Now, this is decimals, so I'm literally going to multiply 25 times 25. Some of you already may know that without doing the long computation. I'm okay with that. 25, 125, 10, 5, you should get 625. I know that there are 1, 2, 3 places values behind, so 1, 2, 3 place values behind. So my final answer ends up being -0.625. So for a recap of rational numbers, adding and subtracting, I need to make sure I have common denominators. Multiplying and dividing, I need to make sure I'm using improper fractions, if any mixed numbers. And then when I multiply decimals, I need to make sure I'm moving that decimal point over